India has been stressing on that time and again, and every dialogue that we've had with China also, India's demand has been exactly that, to ensure status quo ante along the line of actual control, and that's what will mean de-escalation for us. Let me take this across to Shujaul Haq. As we put out those pictures for you of the Prime Minister at Nimu, let's explain where exactly he is. For a lot of our viewers, this will be a place they've never heard of, Shuja. So explain the significance of this particular place, Nimu. Why did the Prime Minister decide that when he lands in Leh, this will be the first place he visits?
Well, Akshita, you know, almost all the eastern Ladakh areas in the forward front have been tense for, you know, as we know, for last couple of months. And since the June 15 incident, the tension has been all the more, you know, on the higher side. Now, what has happened today is very, very significant and important. The Prime Minister has chosen to fly down himself to some of these areas. If you talk about the place which has been given out in the statement also, Nimu. Nimu is basically an area along the Indus river in this region. There are many areas, but one of these areas, which is Nimu, is important because of its significance and the proximity towards the line of actual control. The Prime Minister is perhaps at this point of time in this area, which is close to 11,000, you know, it's very near to the Zanskar Hills, very high as per as the figures go, and at the same time he is interacting with not just the troops on the ground, with the army. He is also interacting with the ITBP. He is talking, getting briefings from the Indian Air Force. So overall, if you look at the importance of this act, it's in itself significant because of the kind of atmosphere that has been prevailing in this area for last you know, few months, and particularly after the bloody incident that took place on June 15. People who are experts in this field and know this area are saying that this is not just going to be an important exercise when it comes to taking the briefing from the people right on the ground, but it's also going to be a huge morale boosting exercise. As you were pointing out, what kind of reaction it would have from the other side is something that we'll have to wait and see. But with this particular action, Indian side has made it very clear once again that they've been wanting disengagement, but the Chinese so far do not seem to be in the mood to do that. But the firmness that the India is showing is very visible now. That disengagement is what India wants, but if it comes to something else, then the preparedness is also there. The guard is not being let down. In fact, you know, as many other experts were pointing out, what has happened over past few weeks is very clear that India is ready to deal with any eventuality if it is thrown into one.
You know, so far, and let me take this across to Gaurav. So far, Gaurav, the messaging from the government has been that perhaps our action with regards to China at the line of actual control is something that will be decided militarily. And as far as the political leadership is concerned, they would perhaps be limited to taking decisions on how to dent China economically. This changes that equation and that perspective that was put out earlier.
Oh, it indeed does. The Prime Minister's presence in Ladakh changes the dynamics of the game, because the Chinese may look at it as escalation, but the Chinese may also realize that this is India's very firm resolve. How would India have reacted if Chinese President Xi Jinping, you know, visited their forward troops, let's say in the Aksai region? India would have seen it as a major escalation. But in this case, because China transgressed the LAC, at two locations there is cause for concern. The first location is Pengongso, where the Chinese have come between finger 4 and finger 8. The second is Galwan. In every other location, from what my sources tell me, in Chumar, Indian Army is present there in very, very big numbers. You know, and that is where the Chinese, we are told, are on the defensive. When it comes to north in Depsang, there is a cause for concern. Now, Depsang is actually a high altitude, you know, in that area, those are plains, the Depsang plains, which is where, you know, there's a different kind of fight that you look at, you know, when you have your armor deployed in some of those areas, you know, on either side, Depsang and in Chumar, when you have your forces deployed there. But the current situation is Pengongso. How do you get the Chinese to go back beyond finger 8? and in Galwan, where according to my sources, Indian army is on the heights and at petrol point 14. The Chinese want to make a road there. You know, Akshita, what is extremely interesting is the Chinese already have a road almost everywhere along the 830-kilometer long Ladakh line of actual control, except in Galwan. And it's in Galwan that the Chinese are now trying to make a road. Indians are ahead of the Chinese there, and that is why the Chinese did what they did, and Indians have stalled them. With the Prime Minister's presence in Ladakh, India's resolve to ensure that the Chinese move back will only be strengthened further.
Definitely, Gaurav. And as we put out those visuals also of the Prime Minister in Nimu, those pictures that you see there on the left of your screens, that is of the Prime Minister just as he arrived there with the Chief of Defence Staff, General Rawat, as well as Army Chief, General Naravne. And to the right of your screens is the debriefing by senior personnel to the Prime Minister, explaining there on what looks to be a map, explaining to the Prime Minister what the situation is perhaps in different parts of the line of actual control. We will be getting you details of the Prime Minister's schedule later in the day. As of now, there's been no communication from the PMO. It seems intentional at this point that there is no information being put out. We've been discussing that as well. And Gaurav, do you think that it's also because of security reasons? As we discussed, things are still very much tense at the line of actual control. And do you think it's keeping that in mind that at this point, you know, there's no detailed schedule of where the Prime Minister is headed next?
You're absolutely right. You know, the Prime Minister's visit to Ladakh was kept under wraps. Initially, it was said that Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will be going there, interacting with troops. And then this morning, we learned that the Prime Minister was there. You know, the Army Commander, Northern Command, he's been there for some time, the Co-Commander. And if I may, all the information that the Prime Minister gets now is information, as you rightly pointed out, is available to him in Delhi. But his interaction with boys on ground, with our soldiers on ground, with the fighting force that's expected to go across, you know, that is very interesting. And that will be a force multiplier and as a morale booster for those fighting Faujis when they interact with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And they've all been lined up, from what I've been told, at the Leh airfield for a detailed interaction with the Prime Minister. Your attack helicopters, your transport helicopters, your fighter pilots, your infantry troops of the Jat Regiment, of the Bihar Regiment, and several other formations are already there. The radar controllers, you know, when you look at those images that are coming out, those are the troops who are deployed on ground protecting our, frontiers. They will be interacting with the Prime Minister, and with renewed vigor, they will ensure that they stay there and push the Chinese back. You know, we have a brigade at Tangse, and that's a very crucial brigade from what I've been told, which is involved in the action now, and the Prime Minister will be interacting with elements of that brigade also, Akshita.
Right. And, even as we continue to get